some guidance. This is not a hearing as such, it's a workshop. The fact that it provides submitters an opportunity to put forward their views and you can ask for clarifications. The clarification does not necessarily pertain only to the people who are speaking. You could also seek clarification from staff. So welcome to this workshop on the Tupu Pai, growing well. The first person to speak is Katie Aga from Whakapoa Farm, Ngātotara Farm.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Katie Aga and I'm here on behalf of Wakapua and Ngātotara Farms. We have reviewed the extensive Growing Well strategy and the Kāpiti Coast Urban Development Greenfield Assessment, and we want to commend the Council on the work you have done here to identify areas of growth. Upon reviewing these documents, however, we believe that there is a potential key future area of growth in Otaki that has been missed from the assessment, and we want to present it as an opportunity area for the Council to consider to include in their strategy to deliver considerable housing to the Kāpiti Coast. Wakapua and Ngātotara Farms own a substantial amount of land that is hard up against the urban area of Otaki. It's situated north of the current Otaki township and is approximately 200 hectares of prime land for residential development. This land is currently dairy farming land. However, with its close proximity to the Otaki township, we are fully aware that this may not be a long-term option for this land. It does, however, present great opportunity to deliver residential housing to the Otaki community. We are very lucky to have a number of advantages in our area that makes a residential development a very realistic form of use for this land. The land is owned by one party, and we are very open to discussions with the Council about how a development here could fit in with your plans to provide residential housing that the Otaki community requires. This land has a number of natural gems, including the Ngātotara Lagoon and the Waitohu River, which could be transformed into an oasis of native planting and wildlife. A proportion of this land is located opposite the Otaki Golf Course, which is a fantastic community asset in the Kāpiti Coast. A sizable residential development next door could future-proof this asset for Otaki. We feel that compared to other future urban growth areas identified in Otaki, we have less constraints in terms of the assessment criteria in the Boffa-Miskell report, such as the availability to infrastructure, less natural hazards, and the minimal disturbance to local neighbourhoods. Over the last 18 months, and as recently as earlier this month, we have had preliminary discussions with a number of parties to see whether this idea could be one that's turned into a reality, and we have had very positive feedback. We believe a portion of this proposed area, approximately 100 hectares, is ready to be developed now and could see housing up and ready within 3 to 5 years. This section is the land opposite the Otaki Golf Course. There is an opportunity here for a substantial development of a retirement village and the creation of a native forest to protect and restore the areas of significant natural wetlands. This could become a haven for an ageing population of Otaki and will also assist in supporting the local golf club. Not only does this type of development open up new housing options for Otaki, but with the older generation moving into a retirement village, it opens up other housing opportunities in the area as they vacate. There are also employment opportunities a development like this could provide, not only during the construction phase, but also long-term employment for workers at the retirement village, which could also include an aged care facility for the region. There are also environmental benefits with the restoration of the Ngātotara Lagoon, wetland and drains. We could dedicate a sizable portion of the land dedicated to native planting, creating an environment for native birds and wildlife to return to the area. The GWRC have already identified a species of mudfish that could be re-established in the Ngātotara Lagoon. There are also social benefits to providing a housing development like this, with villagers being able to access walkways and cycleways through the planted area around the lagoon and even connecting up to the Waitohu River. And also, as I mentioned, increased residential housing in this area will support the Otaki Golf Club, continued service and social interaction in the Otaki community. We would very much like to invite the council out to our area to have a look at this amazing growth opportunity and to see if it could be considered as being a part of the growing well plan for Kāpiti. Thank you for your time today.
Very good. Councillor Compton.
Kia ora, Katie. Thank you for that presentation. It was very comprehensive. My question is, given that this is currently in farmland and we've got the proposed national policy statement on highly productive land that's somewhere in the works and is going to land heaven knows when, what sort of soil classes are we talking about is underneath these 200 hectares? Is it highly productive? Is it in the class 1 to 3, or is it sitting just beyond that?
I guess it's a mix of a bit of it. The 100 hectares that I mentioned in the later part of that presentation is mostly sandhill, so that is less productive. I guess the other 100 hectares, which is a little bit closer to the township, there is potentially productive land, but again, because of its proximity to the Otaki township, whether dairy farming will get resource consent 20, 30 years into the future is something that we've considered.
Cool, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Morena, Katie, and sorry I didn't recognise you in the corridor with your mask on. Look, I think you covered off really succinctly what you and your dad and the team there are looking at achieving, and it's pretty exciting. Do you want to just touch on three things? The first one being the iwi land within that area and the discussions, I guess, will be the desire for you to work with them, and then I've got two further questions.
Yeah, sure. So Ngā Hapu of Otaki has in their maps there's a significant area of which is the Ngā Tōtara Lagoon, and then there is another section which is a piece of Māori land which is 50% owned by my family and 50% owned by the Māori land. And so the plan with that lagoon area is to really plant it up and re-establish it with native planting and bring back the wildlife there and really sort of take care of it. At the moment, we do farm that land, and that's all that's been identified that we sort of do with that land at the moment. But being able to bring back planting and bring back some sort of native wildlife into the area could create a really lovely area for everyone to enjoy.
Thanks, Katie. And I guess that flows on to my next question, which is around the work with Greater Wellington you've already been engaging with around the planting and so forth. Maybe touch on that a little bit, and then I've just got one final question.
Yeah, sure. So we have been working with the Greater Wellington Regional Council with planting on our farm areas. So this is around the lagoon itself and then along the streams and the drains as well. So we're very committed to doing that. I know my brother's very excited getting his green thumb out again. But yeah, that area we have already started that works on and trying to protect it as best we can.
I think in the last one, I guess, goes to the seriousness of the team to get stuff done. You've already got had consented proposals into council for a couple of other pieces of land there, I guess, to turn this into a reality.
Yes, so we've had one proposal consented, and the other is currently it's been submitted and it's in the review stage, I believe, at the moment, just waiting for us to come back with a few answers to questions. But yes, we are very serious about this and getting in. We do have the resources now to be able to make this sort of dream of my father's, which has been about 20 years, sort of a reality popping up. So yeah, we're very excited and we're very serious about this opportunity.
Cool. And sorry, lastly, from what I've heard from when meeting with you and the team, is a real willingness to work with council over what a good development looks like. So it'd just be helpful to know your aspirations around there. It's not that you're sort of setting your own plans to push ahead. So
yes, no, we're willing to, because when this sort of the growing well proposal came out, this is when we sort of thought, oh shoot, we need to talk to you and find out what your plans are and how our plan could fit in, or what we could do with you to come up with something that could provide housing to the Otaki community.
Thanks for coming in, Katie. That's great.
Thank you.
Councillor McCann, and then I've got to move along with the next speaker.
Kia ora, Katie. It's nice to see you in the flesh, Councillor McCann here. And full disclosure, the housing team are making a site visit next week. One of the things that we were starting to discuss was the idea that people in Ōtaki wanted to stay in Ōtaki. Can you expand on that? I've got one further very short question.
Yeah, sure. So I guess with this, building a retirement area in the village means whānau can retire in Ōtaki, and they're just down the road from their loved ones. I know for me personally, my grandmother went to a retirement village in Levin, and we sort of barely saw her after she had moved there. But staying within the area means that you can stay there with your family and enjoy your retirement around your loved ones.
Thank you. And the final question is, can you just tell us very briefly about some of the synergies with the golf course?
Yeah, sure. So we had a few preliminary discussions with the golf course, and they're very excited about it. And we've even gone as far as talking about how we can connect a retirement village to them, and potentially putting an underpass under the road or some sort of safer way for the residents to get across to the golf course, and then coming around the outskirts of the golf course and down into the golf club to use their facilities, to keep their restaurant and their bar going, and also using the course as well, which I know a lot of over 70-year-olds are very excited about.
Thank you very much.
Right. Next. Thank you very much, Katie. Respondent 71 says name withheld. No? Welcome. Name withheld.
I'm Stuart Fraser.
Oh, well done.
I'm probably the next one, thanks.
Welcome.
Morena. Yes, my name is Stuart Fraser, and I live at Te Hora Beach, and it is my intention in the future to move to Ōtaki. So my views are based around concern for the development of these areas in particular. And I must thank KCDC for producing such a comprehensive questionnaire and the opportunity for us to express our views. My main concerns for the growth strategy are medium density residential housing and the services required, residential development sites, and use, care and health of our land. There's no doubt that higher density housing throughout our country is required to accommodate an expanding population. With the availability of adequate services, this can result in closer, more efficient style of community living. We expect the Wellington commuter rail service to extend to Ōtaki and beyond, eventually. This, however, will allow 6-storey buildings to be constructed within a 400-metre catchment of the railway station in Ōtaki under the proposed RMA bill. This may be suitable for the commercial area of what is still State Highway 1, but hardly so for some fairly new and other adjacent single-storey residential homes. The same applies for Main Street in Ōtaki Town. This may not be an issue in the very near future. As Rob McCann wrote recently, these tall buildings could be a developer's risk without some sort of tenancy guarantees, and that may not be something that happens within the next few years. New Zealand's population, although spreading out, may not increase at the rate of previous decades because of the COVID effect, limited immigration, and perhaps not as a dramatic population growth as previously. With redevelopment comes demolition waste. Serious conditions should be placed on the safe, intelligent recycling and disposal of all demolition materials. There will be a cost factor, but the remedial cost of poor waste treatment is evident now. Look at the toxic result of the landfill we have used in Hokio Beach Road. Few of us would wish to lose sun and privacy to high-rise neighbours in locations we have chosen to live for those benefits. I would suggest that multi-storey residential development should be confined to new subdivision areas where the neighbourhood would be established as such. No surprises for homeowners and purchasers, and this is as is at the Timawana and Kāpiti Expressway junction where there are some multi-storey units already. In moving to new developments, the land must be chosen carefully. Good quality food producing land must be maintained as such. Lack of it will become a major issue in the future. Once lost to housing, it will never be retrieved. The land that has passed its use-by date as horticultural and agricultural purposes must be assessed for contamination before a development commences. These areas have for decades been layered with sprays and fertilisers. There will be a cost for the clean-up, but the remedial cost will be greater still and more inconvenient, if even possible, retrospectively. High farming practice standards must be enforced now to minimise this issue in the future. KCDC's plan for the future must be sound. As a territorial authority, you may be asked to make decisions on qualifying matters that arise from development questions. KCDC will be the primary decision maker on contentious issues, and if your plan has integrity, we will be able to solve our own problems without necessarily government intervention. The interconnection of the whole district by shared pathways is also very important to me, with the increased popularity of e-bike travel in particular for recreational and practical purposes like local shopping and visiting. My few comments are centred on Ōtaki, but are hopefully relevant to other localities in the district. Thank you.
Right. Quick questions. Councillor Coates.
Morena, Stuart, fellow Tohoro Beach resident and Ōtaki Ward
James.
councillor. Appreciate you coming in and providing feedback, and it's been really helpful just understanding how you see Kāpiti growing well. And just looking at your submission around these comments here around electrification and double tracking, and I just want to clarify whether I've read that right. As a councillor, I've had concerns around the growth stuff where that public transport service doesn't yet exist. And is that what you're referring to, where you say not acceptable conditions around the growth because the infrastructure isn't there?
At the moment.
Yeah.
I know it's on the list.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it will happen eventually.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Yes.
Okay, and look, I share the same concerns. I just wanted to clarify that was what you meant.
Yes, I'm talking about the rail to Ōtaki and then potentially Levin as well.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for coming in.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Stuart.
Okay, cheers.
The next is Grant Robertson, the organisation Future of Tihoro Group.
Morena, it was a sort of a private initiative that I had a few months ago to try and get together a group to think about the future of Tihoro, and it was actually really good timing, wasn't it, with the deluge of changes that are coming. The growth strategy, I think, is tremendously well put together, and I congratulate councillors and their consultants who did that. I think it's a great document. And I think the balance between intensification and greenfields is about right. I think intensification has to take priority over greenfields, but obviously there is a need for greenfields as well. So this particular submission I'm making is really as a result of 2 or 3 meetings of Tihoro people, and so I've tried to absorb a lot of their thoughts and inputs into my submission. So this submission, as I say, is very much around Tihoro. So the big thing that people wanted to understand really was what part does Tihoro need to play in delivering homes for 40,000 or 30,000 people. Does the council have any view of where those people might go on a broken down basis of each village or each town? And I guess the shaded yellow lines that are showing around, the Houtree area as a future discussion greenfield indicates that probably the council is looking, 10 years out and wanting to make a small town there. So that suggests, maybe 3,000 people is the number of people that may well want to live in Tihoro. I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands more that would want to, but of course it is a restricted land resource with some very tight rules around it. So the first question to answer would be, it's come through loud and clear that Tihoro people are not against change. But I guess they wanted to have, and the devil's in the detail, they want to have an input into how and where that might happen. So building a new town is one concept, but there is another concept of actually spreading people around in hamlets and villages and a less concentrated area. And so there's been some maps drawn around where those growth areas might be and where those villages might be. And the future of Te Horo is very much tied to soil types. KCDC's view is that it is the food basket of the Kāpiti Coast. That's a nice ideal, but it's not necessarily the reality. However, Te Horo people do understand that you have to retain capability for food production. So the second point is, first point, what part is Te Horo expected to play? The second part is closer analysis is required of soil types and the economics of horticulture to determine what and how to protect those valuable soils of Te Horo. So if you follow the totara trees, you'll generally find the less productive areas. And there are a lot of land that is flat and is perceivably ideal for horticulture, but is extremely stony. So there are a lot of nuances to the green areas of Te Horo. So the second thing, or the next part was, obviously the perception of Te Horo was it's a lifestyle area, but within that there is a lot of craft, there is a lot of industry, there is a lot of tourism, there's a lot of softer stuff happening around accommodation and arts and crafts. So it's a strong feeling that that's Te Horo's future. It's not necessarily in food production. Cauliflowers and broccoli are now grown in 500 hectare enterprises based in Levin, Rangitikei, Gisborne, the Waikato, and new areas are opening up all the time for the scale growing of those things, vegetables. So Te Horo is a boutique area, and it can earn important dollars for the Kāpiti Coast as the first stop rural out of Wellington. Hence the importance of bridleways, cycleways and walking tracks. Key to the growth of Te Horo in that area, of course, is on-off ramps at Peka Peka, and it came up at the meeting that was a very strong need, to have that link into Te Horo from that end. There's also been a recurring theme in Te Horo that they would like to see clusters around the village centres. So between School Road and Gear Road is obviously an area that long-term needs to be opened up for greater growth in Te Horo. And then you think of the area south of the Te Horo Cafe and the old Hyde Park. There's also another hub there, isn't there, which are now linked by the bridge between. Other areas so that's a long-term desire to see, a shop, a cafes, growth, sports fields, better community facilities in those areas. So another question was, how important is it for rules to support continuity for people within communities? And Kate touched on this, and I think also Stuart, about, someone's lived on a farm, they've lived on a 10-acre block. How do they stay in Te Horo if they can't subdivide their land? Are there 1-acre blocks for them to go to, or half-acre blocks? So that was a really big question. The other one that you may notice or picked up on in the submission was the Papa Kāinga concept. There's a lot of people that have 20 acres and they'd love to be able to bring their kids in to live on the land with them and have those intergenerational. Now, I've spent a little bit of time in Europe, and certainly in the rural areas there, they actually add another wing every 100 years and, replace the old one that's 400 years old. So you have these sort of extended family dwellings, and so it's a big part of our European heritage as well for families to live intergenerationally. So strongly express the desire for Papa Kainga rights to be extended to European.
Grant, are you going to take any longer? Can you sum
I've
up?
only got one thing. Is there a bell or a timer there?
It went about yesterday.
Yep. So above all, just to wrap up, I think, the important thing about the Kāpiti Coast is the string of pearls, the towns and villages along the way with green spaces between. So, if there's a lot of development going to happen at Peka, then there needs to be green belts either side of it. And if there's going to be some more development in Te Horo, then there needs to be green areas to the north of that as well between Te Horo and Otaki. Thank you.
Right, just hang in there. Any questions? Councillor Pravano.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Grant, for coming along and speaking today. So I suppose this is probably more of a general question in terms of some of those smaller areas that are on the beach that potentially could be developed. I'm interested in your thoughts on whether there should be better connectivity along the beach between these smaller communities rather than having to go up to the main road and then along and then down again.
It could even be cycle paths and bridle paths and walking paths, couldn't it? And certainly, I've been an advocate for linking roads throughout the whole of my real estate career. And I've worked on it in Levin and Horowhenua just to make sure that, because, we are a young country, we've got the backbone, and then we've got all these ribs going off and no connectivity between. So I certainly, I'd love to see Wairongamai Road linked through to Waikawa. Corbett's Road linked to North Manukau to Kuku, from Kuku through to Florida Road. It would actually add so much to the cycling, tourism, interconnectivity, resilience, in times of disaster. There's so much benefit from linking, and, all we've got at the moment is that main road, all the things going off. Yes, absolutely. And it can start with walkways.
Well, I suppose too also it's about planning now rather than thinking about later, we need to do this.
Absolutely agree. Yep, absolutely agree.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for your time, Grant. The next.
Are we only allowed
hold on. Oh, he's bunked off very quickly too. Right, we got a couple. Grant, we got a couple other questions. So I see James Cook first or Jackie Elliott first?
Was Jackie? I'll just.
Jackie.
Yeah. Thank you, Grant. And Stuart, it's really, really lovely to see such passion for Te Horo. I was a resident there too, and now a resident of Waitaki. I love your idea, Katie. Thank you. So I wanted to ask staff for just some clarification on what the yellow crosshatched area on the maps looks like as far as a timeline for development.
So the wording was very much around discussion. So it's always dangerous when things are put on a map because they tend to stay there. So I think that, it's signalled that it's a long way out, 10 years out, 15 years out. It's for discussion. So I always remember it was held up in all the discussions around the Peka on-off ramps that there was a very strong body of opinion of Peka people that they didn't want the on-off ramp. So what I'm saying is there seems to be an awareness that if you have a strong community group that is prepared to have an opinion, you can influence things. And so, from that, Te Horo is saying, well, we want to be involved in decisions about if there's going to be a town put in the middle of it. I don't think anyone was against it, but it was like, hey, we need to be involved. Yeah.
Councillor Coates.
Morena, Grant, thanks for coming in. Two quick questions, and by no means any criticism. Obviously there's a bit of discussion on social media around the public meetings and the reason for that. The submission titled The Future of Te Horo Group, it might be just helpful to clarify how many people attended those meetings, I guess to give some context as to the weight behind the submission. I applaud you on the initiative, but I think it's in terms of the clarity, I think there was comments around you being a real estate agent, but equally you live in the area as well?
Born in the area, lived here 70 years.
Yeah.
I have a very strong commitment to the area. I resented greatly those comments.
And so maybe just help us understand how many people attended the meeting.
So the first meeting was 12, and as I say, it wasn't advertised, it wasn't put on any Facebook pages. It was just, I wrote an article in the paper and I just said, hey, if you want to discuss it, come along. 12 people came along. It was a really vibrant discussion. A lot of stuff was on the table. So when the Growing Well strategy came out, I said, well, we need a follow-up. So I emailed those 12 people, and other people said, well, can we put it on the Facebook page, etc., etc. Now, I never saw the comments, but somebody said to me, some dickhead sort of said, oh, what's this real estate agent? You know, the fact is that I am a Tūhoro person.
You should be very careful of the language you use.
Sorry.
I'll come to my next question, just so you don't get in trouble. The subdividing of larger blocks. So just very briefly, because we've got other people waiting, how do we balance that out between keeping that rural nature and allowing someone with a 6, 8, 10 acre block to carve that into 2 smaller blocks, or a 1 acre and a 9 acre as you've proposed? And interested in what, and I guess from your knowledge as a real estate agent, what people are wanting to do as opposed to what you've heard out there in terms of retaining the character.
Yeah, so it is about trying to listen to what people are saying and thinking how widespread it is. So the second meeting was about 20 people, so there was more, and there were people that came pushing their particular barrows. So, you know, I've reported fairly faithfully what was put forward, and tried to keep my own views pretty much in the background. So it's a really difficult area, and there is no easy answer. But for example, if you've got a 300-acre dairy farm, you're probably entitled to about 15 or 20 small blocks as of right if you subdivided. So if you said to the farmer, right, well, okay, so you're entitled to 20, we'll give you 21-acre lots all in one area, and you keep the farm. The farm is then zoned forever for productive land. That's one way of doing it. So, you know, those 20 houses, obviously your biggest concern in Tūhoro is water and sewage. So, you know, you have to come up with, and I've seen them in France, little villages, you know, with their wetland water cleansing systems, where they deal with the sewage of 50 houses through a series of wetlands. And so it can be done. I don't know all the answers on that. But if you had a clump of 50 houses, you know, and it was approved by council, or 20 houses, you would have to make strong rules around wastewater treatment and water supply.
Thank you, Grant. And under the 3 waters, I'm not sure how that will work, but we can catch up offline. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. The next, the respondent 63, Colin Davis is no longer speaking on Zoom. We go on to respondent 126, Gerald Rice from the Waikanai Beach Residents Society is on Zoom. Is he ready?
Yeah. Thanks.
Morena, Mayor and councillors.
Gerald, welcome. We've got your written submission. If you can just touch on the main points, and then I can open it up for questions.
So what we were going to do, basically, I was going to introduce a few points, then Andrew Hazelton was going to talk about the submission and just emphasise a few points.
Yep.
Then we wanted, Pat Doignan was going to actually talk about our submission to the Select Committee, which directly related to our submission here. As you're well aware, the Resource Management Act amendments are directly relevant.
As long as it's very tight.
Yeah, I've only got 4 points to make. Firstly, I'd just like to stress the importance of special character areas. We can talk about development in building and that, but let's make sure that special character areas need to be seen as well as critical community assets. They enhance the cultural, social, economic and environmental well-being, and there is a need for them now more than ever before. They cannot be recovered once they're gone. The other point I'd like to make, and we're going to focus on Waikanai Beach, obviously, that the Waikanai Beach area has been recently designated, or part of it has been designated as beach residential, so that gives it a sort of special character status at present. And the other point we'd like to make is that our future Waikanai Beach document that was developed by the community some 3 to 4 years ago now, clearly identifies what the community wants to see in the special character area going forward. It has 4 Maori themes that drive that view: the Waitapu, you Kaipotanga, the whakapapa of the area, and the Kaitiakitanga. And that's followed by 25 action points that seek to preserve the special character of Waitanai Beach. And the Society's views have been canvassed amongst our members, and I might add that we probably had the strongest response we've ever had from our members about what their feelings were in terms of our submission. So passing over to you quickly, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Gerald. Mr Mayor, councillors. I'll just make a few points because I know you're running behind time. As a lawyer, I look at the high level to start off with, and I think it's important to look at Objective 3 of the NPS and to realise that where we talk about centre zones, which include local centres as currently identified in the district plan, the only objective that's relevant is Objective 3A. The area is in or near a centre zone or other area with many employment opportunities. That's what the NPS focuses on for local centres, and it's that adjunctive with many employment opportunities that, to my mind, mean that Te Moana Junction simply doesn't fit into a local centre as defined as a centre zone within the NPS. It's incorrect to assume that every local centre should be the subject of NPS intensification. And just simply going back to that definition made me realise that the Boffa-Miskell report is incomplete in that regard because it doesn't contain any analysis as to whether Te Moana local centre meets the criteria. There's only light analysis, but there's no evidential foundation for it. The other thing that's relevant is Policy 3D, which is in relation to Tier 1 urban environments. I think it's very unfortunate that the council's been thrust in Tier 1 urban environment, given the range of environments that exist in Kāpiti. But when you look at paragraph 3.12 of the Boffa-Miskell report, it's quite clear that it's an incomplete assessment because the housing business assessment has not been completed. So we've got a bit of predetermination going on about how Te Moana would be fantastic for intensification without even doing the HBA. You can't have one without the other. And that's why when the submission was drafted, things are fast moving here and there's a lot of information to absorb at any one time. And that goes for the council and council officers, and I feel really sorry for you, frankly. But the simple reality is that the way that Te Moana has been identified in my submission is flawed. Now, if the council wants a logical alternative, what has been completely missed in the Boffa-Miskell report is the urban identification of Narara, and it's already zoned. It's got mixed use, it's got heavy retail. If you look at appendices 7 to 9 of the district plan, there's a whole management structure for Narara, and there's going to be detailed retail. They talk about swimming pool, they talk about schools, cafes. That's where the local centre should be. And then you've got the 2 open space zones adjacent to the interchange. So that combined with the fact that the reality is, even if it was zoned for intensification, it wouldn't happen for 30 to 50 years because the area is so tightly held. It would defeat the purpose of the NPS. So those are the main points that I want to make. There are more detailed oral submissions I could make, but I think it's covered in our written submission, at least to the extent that we could all get our heads around it in the limited time that we had. My key is there needs to be a qualitative assessment, and if there is, I think that you'll realise that Te Moana local centre zone just simply is inappropriate for intensification. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Pat.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. And first, can I say that I sympathise with the staff of KCDC who face the prospect potentially of having to implement the bill, the Resource Management Enabling Housing Supply Bill, currently in front of Parliament, with the deadline of August next year. myself presented a submission on behalf of the Waikanae Beach Residents Society to the Environmental Committee, which I have supplied,
You're cutting off.
and I believe the councillors have. The key point out of that is that the Presswater House analysis, cost-benefit analysis provided
Pat, you're cutting off.
as the backbone to the bill has. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, keep going, Pat.
My apologies. Sorry. You can hear me okay now, please?
You're cutting off in
Right.
so
Thank you.
can hear you.
So, PricewaterhouseCoopers say our base case assumes that the meet against the residential standard policy will nullify special character effect, making properties with special character status just as likely to be developed as others. And so the question that we all face is whether, in view of submissions, not mine particularly, but general ones, the bill will be amended. Failing the bill being amended to at least raise the odds of being able to defend a special character status, I would still hope that KCDC will look at applying the criteria for exemption so as to be able to preserve the residential beach residential status. And so I wanted then just to ask, if I may, through you, Mayor, whether or what will happen in terms of the strategy in the event that the bill is passed as is intended by mid-December. Are you able, please, and excuse me for asking it that way, whether that will, in terms of the bill, mean that you must stop this current process, or whether you have been advised that you'll be able to continue with it? Thank you.
Right. Question time. Question can be directed to either Gerard, Andrew, or Pat. So the first one of the block, Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, thank you for your submission. I guess my question is, we can't stop people wanting to move to Waikanae Beach, yet you're arguing against intensification. So what do you think that's going to do for housing affordability in Waikanae Beach and the financial sustainability of living there for your people who already reside there?
Well, the first thing is we're not talking about Waikanae Beach, we're talking about Kāpiti District. And it's where intensification in the district is appropriate. And that's quite clear in the NPS. The NPS makes it quite clear, for example, that it's relative to other areas within the urban environment. So just focusing on Waikanae Beach, if you were simply to focus on Waikanae Beach, then your question, the premise of your question would be correct. But it's the incorrect premise because we're focusing on the wider area of Kāpiti. So that's the first answer. And in terms of financial viability, that's not a relevant consideration under the Resource Management Act. That's just a flow-on effect. What effectively we're looking at is effects here. And although there is an economic effect to certain things, the reality is that financial viability, prices go up, prices go down. But what we're looking at is effects. So that would be my response to that question.
Thank you.
Councillor Halborough.
Yeah, thank you for this very thorough and well thought out submission. It certainly made very interesting reading. I'm just wondering about your comment that intensification should be around rail networks, not road networks. Is it not inevitable that when you put in fast, effective road infrastructure, people are going to want to move there? And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes is your answer. Yes, I wouldn't dispute that. But whether that's a good thing or not, and what we should be planning for, is a different question.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if you move, the further you move away from those main arterial routes, the more impact there is on local roading systems to get people to where they want to go. Do you have any kind of comment about that?
I don't know about that because it is a linear highway in the sense that there is an interchange and it goes north and it goes south. There may be some increase in local road network traffic, certainly. I don't disagree with that as a proposition. But equally, if I come back to Councillor Compton's question as well, intensification. When we look at intensification at the beach, there's no reason why that should not be around Narara and the interchange, where it's ready-made, and where you have effectively common land holdings, and it'd be so much easier to achieve. It just seems to me to be the obvious point in answer to all of those questions.
No, I don't disagree with that. Thank you very much for your submission.
Right. No other question. Thank you, Gerard, Andrew, and Pat. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Right. Glenn Wiggs, Zoom, supporting the Waikana Beach residents. Oh, he's here. Oh, hi.
I'm here.
He's zoomed in.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing me in person. I'm here to fully support that submission you just heard. And when you actually read it, it's very technical, and it's really a planning document rather than a general document. And I fully support it. The other thing which I like to do is to congratulate the council on its submission to the select committee on the RMA amendment bill. I think it was good, and I particularly like this description of the bill as being a blunt instrument, and it is very much a blunt instrument. And it's the detail. When you come to the detail of implementing it, is where the difficulty is. This are similar. Basically, my comments and the comments which you just heard, that also the proposal around the Timoana Local Centre is also a blunt instrument and doesn't take into account the circumstances and what is happening there. The centre is only 3 shops, and nearby you've got the Narara website, which on my count was just on the plan. There's 15 shops. It's only just a few metres away in technical terms. So that is, to me, the logical place for a local centre. And if in fact, and on top of that, you've got the vacant land across the road. So as Andrew has just said, it can be developed quite easily. A few practical things. The Timoana Centre is located in the tsunami zone, zoned yellow. Is it prudent to build multi-storey buildings in such a zone? The next thing is that Waikanae Beach and the old beach particularly is prone to flooding, and that the reason for that is it used to be a swamp, and it was drained by the fields in order to create a subdivision. But at the end of the day, as soon as you have heavy rain, you have water. Again, is it appropriate to build multi-storey buildings in a former swamp? Yes, and that basically that's all I want to say is that the council and everyone else and the local residents went through blood, sweat, and tears for this document. And it's one and that's the futures document of Waikanae Beach, and having something plonked in the middle of it would destroy that. One further point: on 3 sides. This site, the proposed four-storey area, borders on the men's shed. It'll only be a few metres away, and I can see with 4 stories, the echoing of the sawing and the hammering and all that sort of thing leads to discontent in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all.
Thank you, Glenn. There's a question for you, Councillor Pravanov.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Glenn, for coming along to speak today, and also your previous speakers from the Waikanai Beach Residents Society. So, so just to clarify, so the Waikanai, the zone that's being proposed there is actually is near to the Narara zone that's going to be developed. But also too, down at Waikanai Beach, is it correct that there's also a commercial zone down there? And so what this potentially is, do you think this is actually stretching out that whole area rather than concentrating it?
Yes. Waikanai Beach, Terry Street, has shops and 3 restaurants in it, or 2 restaurants and another one around the corner. And this has been developed, they are all zoned, they are all placed in residential zones. And they're there mainly because of existing use. I think one of them used to be a wool shop, as I recall. So you have this development in Waikanai Beach is quite strange in many ways, and then you have this little centre which is currently zoned commercial, where the fish and chip shop, dairy, and the bakery is. So it is spread out, and I think the residents like it that way as well.
Thank you.
Right, Glenn, there's a question from Councillor Randall on Zoom. Randall, you there?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Glenn, my question to you is, Gerald mentioned about special characteristics, particularly of Waikanai Beach, and he said that should be given a focus, that should be given a priority. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I certainly do. And again, it comes back to this document, and as a result of that, the Waikanai Beach was given the special beach residential zoning, in keeping with Paikakariki, Raumati and Otaki Beach. It was an exception, and it took years and years to get it changed. And particularly the old beach area, it is different. It is special, and it has special character, and it should remain that way.
Right.
Okay. So another question is, Andrew talked about under intensification. He mentioned the word predetermination. I didn't quite understand what he was referring to. But you being a lawyer, you might know.
By intensification, I gather he means high-rise buildings and
no, it was predetermination. The word predetermination.
Oh, predetermination, yes. Basically, what the criticism there was in that Boffa report, where they leaped to conclusions without considering the evidence, and he was arguing that was predetermination of an issue without looking at the evidence, which was quite contrary.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, we've got Councillor Pravanov with another question.
Yes, thank you. So just referring back to the Waikanai Beach outcome statement, how widely was that consulted on, and how widely was agreement made within the community to actually agree with the principles and then to go for the, I suppose, that beach character?
Yes. Basically, this document took, I think, 2 years to get there. There were meetings, public meetings called by the council, which were well attended, and then a group of citizens was set up in a committee. I think it was 47 under an independent chair, and they met for another year or so. And then the wide consultation went back several meetings to the public, all the way through the process. It was an excellent process, well done by the council, and that was the end result. So the process, I think, took about two maybe 3 years, and very wide consultation. There were literally hundreds of people were involved.
Thank you, Glenn. No other questions. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
The next is Joanna Parks. Is she here? Well, we'll finish the next 3, then we'll have one. Yeah.
I'm not here at the moment.
Okay, we'll take a break, 10 minutes. This is not good.
I had it was advertised as a workshop.
So you take the workshop and then say it's a submission and then you are accepting the submission
Next week.
So this is another one. Normally what happens is
Yeah, that's where you can just like us.
when I put the patient to the staff, it will take more than a week. I've never come across a situation where I'm caught in because with submission, I can just staff for verification.
No, but so you wouldn't